In Yesler Terrace, you talk about one-for-one replacement, but what about the impact on displacing the people that live there and the nature of the living, where they have their own backyards and living space, as opposed to moving into an apartment?
So the question, I don't know if you all heard it, is about Yesler Terrace and the short-term displacement that will take place as that project is being developed. There is no doubt that moving out of your home, going somewhere else, having to relocate, reestablish your day-to-day existence while you're waiting for a new home is going to be very disruptive. There's no doubt about that. And the management of Yesler Terrace has developed committees that are working with citizens, made up of the citizens who live at Yesler Terrace. They're working with them on a case-by-case, one-to-one basis to make sure that that disruptive transition is as smooth and as easy as possible. But there's no doubt it is going to be disruptive.
There's a number of questions here. I'm going to try and give the general gist of them, but they're all kind of related. How do you define affordable housing and low-income housing? You're talking about at South Lake Union. And for the purposes of incentive zoning, can you tell us why we don't focus on, for example, 50% AMI, family-size housing, 2+ bedrooms? Why don't we apply these to other areas like Northgate? And why won't you support impact fees in general?
So affordable workforce housing is defined by state law, 60% to 80% of the area median income. So for a single individual, that's approximately $39,000 to about just over $50,000. And the city has adopted that as the target area for our incentive bonus program. So if you have a building, let's just use South Lake Union and I'll make up these numbers. If you can build today under zoning up to 85 feet, but then we're going to say you can build up to 160 feet, that difference between 85 and 160, you need to pay, you either need to provide affordable housing units in your structure, or if you don't want to do that, you have to pay in lieu of doing that into the City Housing Fund, and that's designed to meet the needs of people making between 60 and 80% of area median income. Low-income housing is below 60% of AMI, and those needs are addressed through the Seattle Housing Levy, through federal and state funds that we commingle together to provide assistance for construction of low-income housing. Why don't we apply that in all areas of the city like Northgate? We're going to do that with this South Lake Union legislation, where right now incentive programs are available in the downtown area, South Downtown, a small section of Inner Bay, Roosevelt, around the light rail station there, and soon South Lake Union. And anywhere in the city that we upzone, we will apply the incentive zoning program going forward.
Two issues that aren't specifically related to the mayor, but they wanted your opinion on. One is, how do you feel about district elections, and what is your position on charter schools?
So district elections first. I've actually looked at this pretty carefully, and Seattle, after its incorporation, experimented with 4 or 5 different forms of city government. In fact, at one point, if you can believe this, the city council had just over 40 members. It's kind of like a mini state legislature right in Seattle. I don't think we want to go back there. And then finally, in the 1920s, they settled on the model that we have today. 9 council members elected at large. And I'm sure you're all very aware that there have been 3 attempts to shift back to district elections, the last in 2005. I think I'm probably somewhat negative on district elections. Now, I will say that this is a hybrid proposal that's being circulated now, and we haven't considered that before, so that's a little different. But I don't think district elections will result in greater minority representation. I don't think it will allow incumbents to be defeated more often. I don't think it will necessarily change the financial contribution activity around city council elections. So I haven't yet heard a compelling reason why we should shift away from the current system. On charter schools, I did not take a public position on charter school initiative last year. I viewed it as a distraction, not this panacea that's going to solve the problems that we face in public education. We now have them, and we'll see how that goes. I noticed that the members of the Charter School Commission were just appointed, but I'm taking a wait-and-see attitude on how those will be utilized in the city of Seattle and what experience we have as they work out.
Obviously, we don't have control over state, but if you were able to influence changing of state law, what areas would you have them change for the benefit of Seattle, whether environment or whatever?
Well, I think actually the one area that the state could do a much better job is tax reform.
That's mine.
Our hodgepodge of taxes in the state of Washington, I think, is a mess, not effective. And we keep struggling with how are we going to balance the state budget, all those issues that we've been dealing with for years now. And I think until we have fundamental tax reform in the state of Washington, we're going to continue to struggle with those issues going forward. So I would put that at the top of my list. Since that's not likely in the near term, I would probably cite transportation and the funding of transportation infrastructure as critical for the city of Seattle, as something the state legislature could help us with in this legislative session.
Okay, two questions about how the mayor would operate. First is, everyone wants to be the mayor in order to set policy, but isn't that to some degree the role of council? And secondly, who would you put in your team, your leadership team, to make the city different?
That's a great question. So, how would I operate as mayor? Everybody wants to be mayor, and that's true, by the way. There's still time. More of you could sign up if you want. If we get 2 more, we'll have a full football team. The council and the mayor should work closely together to set policy in the city. I think that's a relationship that is crucial. It needs to be close. It needs to be effective. Yes, there will be disagreements. But I think the more collaboration we have between the mayor and the council, the better. In terms of who I will bring onto my team and who I will work with in my administration, I think it's a little early to answer that with specificity. I have said we'll have a new police chief. We will also have new top commanders in the police department. The 2 most important people that affect policing and policing philosophy in our city are the mayor and the chief of police. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to change both at the beginning of the next administration.
My neighborhood is under siege from DPD. Apartments and Ride the Ducks, which adds 150 trips per day, impacts our Lake Union neighborhood. Noise, pollution, traffic impacts are a problem. How are you going to protect us from these projects?
So I'll take apartments first. Councilmember Rasmussen is drafting some legislation right now. I haven't seen it yet. It will impose, I believe, a short-term moratorium on these structures until we can figure out appropriate rules for how we permit those. So I'll have to wait and see that legislation. It's complicated because it's hard to place a moratorium on something that is not already clearly defined, which they're not in our code. So we'll see how his approach is to taking care of that. On the ducks, the only thing I'm aware of there is a application at Lake Union for either a new or refurbished landing site. And I'm sorry, I don't know the specifics around that, and I'd love to learn more about the impact of the duck tours. I took one once.
I'm going to paraphrase pretty grossly here a couple of questions, but I think it has to deal with the departments, whether it be SDOT or DPD or parks, working well and fairly with the community, whether it be ignoring the realities on the ground in a transportation study, or spending. I've lost the question now. I don't know if that's a vague question there. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's all right. So I'll say something and see if it's equally vague or better or whatever. So I'll go back to what I said earlier about what I refer to as customer service. You know, we pride ourselves in Seattle that we have Nordstrom here, and you know, in the retail business, they are frequently ranked #1 in customer service, and in terms of city government, we should aspire to the same thing. And one of the frustrations that we have is if you guys call or send emails or somehow interact with city government, each department does not necessarily handle those inquiries the same way. They're not logged the same way. They're not tracked the same way. It's very difficult to get an assessment of how many people are complaining or asking or inquiring about things on an average weekly basis, for example. We just don't know that information. And I think that goes to the silos that I was referring to earlier. So I would want to reestablish how we interact with the citizens. After all, we work for all of you. We're your servants. We're your representatives. And we should have much better tracking of the relationship between city government and its citizens, and we should be publishing that information and letting you all know how we're doing. We should have satisfaction rankings. We should be reporting how long does it take us to respond to inquiries about streetlights or potholes or whatever. And so we would be moving in that direction.
The waterfront project sounds very exciting. How are we going to fund it? How are we? What will we do about rebuilding our water systems? Do we need a levy for that? Will we have additional transportation type levies? How will we fund this stuff?
So the waterfront the waterfront park, the new open space, and all of that is going to be funded a couple of ways. A primary way will be an LID that will be created along the waterfront and east up into the downtown area, so that the property owners there who benefit from the increase in property values will be helping to pay for what's happening along the waterfront. We also have, for example, the rebuilding of Alaskan Way, the surface street, which the city will do, but it'll be paid for by WashDOT, and that surface street will go along the footprint of the current viaduct. So when the viaduct comes down, the surface street will move east a little bit and be in that footprint. It'll be paid for with state funds. Let me mention bridging the gap in transportation. Bridging the gap levy comes up for renewal in 2015, and I think that we have between right now and when that measure is on the ballot to reestablish the trust and confidence of the citizens of Seattle that we can wisely invest those funds to meet our transportation needs. The vehicle license fee failed because of a lack of trust in the current administration's ability to use those funds wisely. So I think we have a lot of hard work to do over the next 2 years to get ready for the renewal of the Bridging the Gap levy and proving to you and the other citizens of Seattle that we can use those funds effectively to improve our transportation network.
I'm going to add a follow-on to that. So the last Bridging the Gap was grossly underfunded.
Yes.
You alluded to the couple $1 billion in streets maintenance. That just applies to the arterials. It doesn't talk to the non-arterial roads. About 60% of our roadways also disrepair. Will you seek a very large, much larger Bridging the Gap in order to address that gap?
Well, I can't say exactly what size it'll be, but the need is certainly there to seek a much larger amount. And you'll remember, this was before I was on the council. Mayor Nichols proposed a much larger Bridging the Gap levy, and the city council cut it down dramatically. So yeah, we face that issue as to what size it should be. But I'm not afraid to be bold about those things. When the Families and Education Levy came up for renewal, and my council committee led the process of planning in late 2010 through 2011 to get that levy ready for the ballot. And I remember sitting in the meeting of the Citizen Planning Committee. There were about 30, 35 citizens at City Hall, and we went around the room and everyone was talking. This was our last meeting. We were going to vote on what proposal should go to the council, and one of the citizens said we should renew it at the same level. The economy's not doing that well yet. It's back in 2011. So let's ask for same renewal because we don't want to risk that it'll be rejected. Somebody else said, well, maybe 10%. Somebody else said 15%. And after everyone had spoke, I stood up and said, we should double this levy, and here's why. And I made the case for them. We voted unanimously. My council colleagues agreed. We put it on the ballot, and the citizens of Seattle renewed that with 64% approval. That was an investment in our children and an investment in our infrastructure, which is important for everybody, including every citizen and every business, and those who do commerce in our city is just as important.
This is something that perhaps I'll be educated in. I don't know. Can you comment on how the Indeterminate Coordinating Committee will work?
Interdepartmental.
Interdepartmental Coordinating Committee will work if you are mayor. Thank you. I don't even know what that is.
So we have a couple, actually, of those. So I'm not sure which one we're talking about. Is this the neighborhood-focused coordinating committee?
I don't know who asked the question.
That was my question. My understanding was it was an agency-wide around the administration committee.
So I'm aware of interdepartmental teams or interdepartmental coordinating teams on several specific issues. There's one related to 3rd Avenue downtown. There's one related to code compliance issues throughout the city, mostly focused on establishments that serve alcohol. But beyond that, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I think it probably was
urban forestry also.
That's right. There's one on urban forestry.
At one time, I think it was primarily the Department of Neighborhoods had an interdepartmental coordinating committee. So maybe it doesn't longer exist.
Okay.
I don't know, but it might be a good thing.
Yes, I'm aware of that. We used to have, I think they were called neighborhood action teams or something like that, which I thought was a great approach that would be focused on a specific neighborhood to address a variety of issues or problems in that specific neighborhood. And again, this goes back to my coordination comments about how we operate in silos. We used to have tremendous problems with crime in the Aurora motels, just north of the Aurora Bridge and also out near 145th. I think over here.
I know who that goes to.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that.
You do your job.
Okay, thank you. Well done.
You do your job, she'll do hers. Okay.
Well done. Yeah. I accept that. Somebody said, good advice for any mayor. That's right, yeah. So I remember in my early years on the council, 08 and 09, massive frustration in the neighborhoods about these problem motels. And the deputy mayor at the time was talking to an individual who told him about this problem, and this seems really novel, but he brought all representatives from many departments together. What's the problem here? And somebody said from finance, well, you know, those motels haven't paid their taxes in several years. And someone from City Light said, yeah, and they haven't paid their light bill in over a year. And wow, here we are thinking we have this police problem, but we have these other problems as well. And what that allowed the city to do was to go to those owners and say, we're going to shut off your power if you don't pay your light bill. We're going to take you to court on unpaid taxes. And then they applied the chronic nuisance property ordinance, which was my ordinance that I got through the council in 2009. And those motels are not a problem today. And that ordinance has been used successfully in neighborhoods across the city. The most recent that I'm aware of in South Lake Union and Georgetown, one a nightclub and one a motel, that have for months, if not years, caused serious disruption in neighborhoods. And how it started on Aurora was people came together around a common table and said, let's all talk about this issue. Let's put our issues up on the table and find out what the problem is. We should be doing that all the time.
1989, sir, and you were not in office. It was the business people along Aurora in 1989 that actually patrolled the street, that actually had windows broken, and actually received death threats. So don't take all the credit, okay?
I'm only taking credit for what happened in 2009 and 2010.
Okay.
Yep.
You make no mention of protecting jobs and businesses for citizens of Seattle and creating jobs for citizens who are here. There's been a lot of focus on bringing new businesses into Seattle that import people into the city. How will you handle that?
So the question is about job protection in the city while we're growing and also attracting new jobs to the city. Critically important. It's easier to keep the jobs we have than it is to create new ones that come in from new companies starting in the city. But we obviously want both. In 2011, the council passed my Tourism Improvement District ordinance, which created a special district downtown, and hotels with 60 or more rooms participate now in paying a $2 per night for each paid room. That collects almost $7 million a year that's used to promote leisure travel to Seattle. That went into effect in 11. We used it in 2012 to promote the city, and we had the highest occupancy rate in our hotels ever in the city's history. That not only protects jobs we have now, but it leads to more jobs. We have 8 major hotel projects underway or soon to start in the greater downtown area of our city. There was a practical way that the city government aligned our abilities to impose a tax with business owners who wanted that tax because they wanted to raise more money for tourism promotion. That's a positive way that we help protect and create more jobs.
You started out by saying there's a conflict in the current administration, which is a problem. In business, getting along doesn't necessarily mean getting things done. How will you ensure we have efficiency in creating change and getting things done?
So I think the questioner is correct that just getting along is not the objective. The objective is getting things done, and I think that the skills I have, that I've developed over my life and while I'm on the council, of listening well, learning with all of you, and then acting and leading is quite evident. I am able to bring people together to work on common solutions, and I've cited several examples of that in my time on the council.
What specifically will you do to enact, or what specific policies will you enact to enable the development of more affordable housing?
As I mentioned earlier, I think our incentive bonus program needs pretty significant change. It is not receiving enough public benefit when we grant increase in density, when we do rezones. This next week, myself and a couple of my colleagues will announce the specifics of the changes we're going to make in the incentive bonus program to create more affordable housing. That is one way that we create affordable housing. The other way is through our Seattle Housing Levy, which is extremely effective in raising dollars to be matched with federal and state dollars to create affordable housing in the city. We also should be examining what we do with city-owned property, especially in the South Lake Union area where we own a lot of property. When that property has no other use to city government, should we use that property for affordable housing? And is there the opportunity for public-private partnerships that would make that property valuable for affordable housing?
Do you support stronger protections for trees and our urban forest? And will you support funding for the Green Seattle Partnership?
I do, and I voted to establish the Forestry Commission that's working now. We will take action on legislation this year on some parts of their recommendations and more in 2014. But we're still waiting to get the specific recommendations from the Commission.
Green Seattle Partnership, funding for that, it's been cut, and I know that the city's in a tight position. The funding is needed to maintain the work that's being done and not go backward on
Yes, in fact,
cleaning up our parks.
in last fall's budget, we added money in to the Green Seattle Partnership to help encourage that work, which is critically important, removing invasive species from our parks and other work in our park system. But we have not restored the funding to the level it was at before, but we did put some into that.
This is a very specific question. We have an illegal rooming house newly constructed a couple of years ago that DPD and the city couldn't expose.
Enforce.
Oh, enforce. Thank you. I shouldn't even read your question here. Against such a project. Why is this allowed?
I don't know.
The word is wouldn't.
Wouldn't enforce the building code or zoning code.
They couldn't.
Yeah,
She said couldn't.
yeah, and I don't know why. I don't know the answer to that.
Do you have any other questions?
I have a question. A lot of times it seems like the incentives for affordable housing are meant to incentivize development, not affordable housing. What would you do to put the emphasis on affordable housing rather than just incentivizing development?
Thanks, Dennis. And I think your question reveals a flaw in our current incentive zoning program. This program was put in place in downtown in 2008, and then it was applied in other areas of the city in downtown in 2001 and in its current form, and then in other areas of the city in 2008. And again, as I've said, the idea was that if you get bonus, you're going to provide affordable housing. And we have built a grand total of 42 units since that was put in place. And here's why that happens. The developer or the property owner, whoever is doing the project, can put those units in the building they're building, and that's how we got the 42, because several of them have chosen to do that. Or if they don't want to do that, they get to pay in lieu of doing that, and they put the money into the Office of Housing bucket. The Office of Housing takes that money, which was intended for workforce housing between 60 and 80% of area median income, and they commingle it with federal and state money. Federal and state money can only be spent at 60% and below. So what happens is we don't meet our policy objective of workforce housing, but we have developed 1,252, I believe, units below 60% of AMI with those funds. So one way to correct that is to not allow payment in lieu and demand performance, what's called performance. You must put the units in the structure that you're building. That'll be part of the proposal that'll come out next week. The other issue is our definition of workforce housing correct? It's 60 to 80%. Some would argue it should not go above 70%. Others say it should be 50 to 60%. So we'll be looking at that issue as well.
There's a light rail terminal going to emerge in the University District, right next to the old Safeco Tower, now the University piece. Phil Thiel, Professor Emeritus at the University of Washington, would like to see, and I think he's right on target, and I hope you are in agreement with that, a piazza there, a plaza, if you will, would provide a community meeting space that would allow covered walkway from the transit station to the University of Washington. Are you aware of that conversation that's taking place,
Yep.
in fact, that the university would like to creep a lot further west than it is now allowed to do so? So your comments on that?
Yeah, I'm very aware of it, and I've walked around that and done a couple of tours there. So you have Sound Transit, you have the University of Washington, you have the neighbors and the neighborhood, and you have the city government. And I think I like the plaza idea. I don't know enough yet as to what the ultimate solution would be. I think it's a little too early in the process, but more open space is generally always good.
Mayors have a way of doing things.
Yes, they do.
Well, like Nicholson, Northgate, the relighting of Thornton Creek.
Yeah.
It wasn't exactly in his job description, but that's the kind of thing that a mayor can do with a little depth.
Mayor Nichols had nothing to do with that and fought it every way.
That's right.
Neighbor.
I happen to have been involved and I know a little bit about it too.
Okay, hold on. Skip. We're supposed to do written questions, okay? Written questions only, please. Oh, she wants a card, okay? Any other written questions?
Can I just follow up really quickly on Yesler Terrace? My question wasn't so much about displacement, but about livability and the transition from, these places that they do have backyards and they do have something that is a home and moving to apartments and just in general, the difference between focusing on what people need versus what development. And I mean, it's very rich, expensive property, I get that. But can you talk about just what goes into that thinking?
Yeah, so the current conditions at Yesler Terrace, the structures that these folks are living in, need replacement. There's no doubt about that. The systems are in bad repair. We need to rebuild those homes. So that's the core central motivation, I believe.
Why not just rebuild them?
Well, then that's where the other part of the equation comes in. Let's let some private developers purchase land to pay for the rebuilding of those structures. So it's a very complicated project, which I support. It does create a lot of open space in new park areas in the development, in the footprint of the development. Yes, some individuals will lose backyards. They're very small, but they will, in exchange, get a new home, nearby adjacent parks within their area there, and it'll just be a very positive improvement to the neighborhood, in my opinion.
It just took me a long time to realize that progress and development could be good terms because it seems like it's so driven monetarily.
How will you solve the piecemealing and micro-permitting problem?
What is that? Thank you.
Do you know what it is?
Well, I think I know.
It's
where parcels are divided and
a project will be split up, approved by DPD,
right,
when in reality it's all one larger project to avoid review processes.
That's right. So you might have 3 parcels that are adjacent, and they will apply to unify that for one permit and build. But yet DPD views it as 3 separate projects. We've talked to DPD about this and have asked why can't we prohibit that, and I don't actually remember the answer, but we've been told we can't do that. So.
Well, he only has 20 seconds left, so I want to try and get one more question in. The Puget Sound is slowly dying, arguably a larger problem than climate change. What will you do to address that?
Well, I think it's all related. It all fits in the nice same bucket. We're working on the lower Duwamish now, which is a significant cleanup project, which will take a long time. The Puget Sound Partnership has struggled to get going on its feet in terms of what we're doing about deposits coming into Puget Sound. But this is a regional problem, and it affects all of the cities and counties that touch on Puget Sound, which is why it's being addressed at the state level.
Very good. Your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to getting my dating scorecard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.